Before I went to Europe for the first time this summer, I released my 15 most anticipated coasters from the trip. Denmark, Norway, Sweden. It was an incredible trip. Amazing experiences, amazing people, amazing parks, and amazing coasters. Not everything worked out as planned, but I still got to visit every park and picked up 54 new credits. Today, let's see how my top 15 from before the trip shook out, and rank up the 15 best ones. First, here is my top 15 going into the trip. The RMC Wildfire tops the list, and it's rounded out by the new B&M invert, Monster at Groenland. Of these 15, 10 made my final top 15 list. If you saw my vlogs, a big reason for that was missing the best coasters from Vroop Summerland. Right away, we can axe Phoenix, Lynette, and Falcon. The wind was so bad the day we got there, we only got to ride the small coasters in the park. Let's get this started. Number 15, Kongan at Bonbonland. We have a lot of coasters like these in America, but this one actually has a different layout. If you rode the one at Discovery Kingdom, the one that's now at Six Flags Mexico, this is the same model. We rode this once with a balanced car and it was okay, but we figured if we can throw the weight distribution off, it could be really amazing. That's what we did. We got 2 on one side and 1 on the other, and it was the greatest spinning coaster experience I've ever had. Well, with the exception of Time Traveler, that's a different beast. I've ridden Gerstlauer spinners off balance before, but none of them were as out of control as this one. This was not ranked on my pre-trip list, and it turned out to be a big surprise. Number 14, Raban at Tivoli Gardens. This was number 9 on my list before I left, and it was the coaster I was most looking forward to at Tivoli Gardens. It dates back to 1914, and it's the only coaster I've ever ridden that still uses a brakeman. This guy who sits in the middle of the train and controls the speed. I heard it was an airtime machine, and that wasn't the case, at least not for me. I know it matters where you sit, and the way it boards, it was hard to get the back row without getting lucky, and it depends on how good your brakeman is. In the front row, I got 2 nice pops of air at the beginning, but that was it. And in the middle and toward the back, I pretty much stayed in my seat the whole time. I was disappointed, but this is still a very smooth and very fun ride, so it's still top 15. Number 13, Mine Train Ulven at Bakken. This was my first Intamin mine train, and I didn't know what to expect. It looked like a family coaster to me, so I didn't rank it up on my pre-trip list. This was the best surprise at Bakken and the best coaster in the park. I know that's a surprise to a lot of people. It stands 61 feet tall and then winds its way down through the trees. That first drop in the back row is amazing, but watch your hands. Those branches hang very low, and even if you keep your hands down, watch your face. I had a tree branch hit my ear. Those turns were very fast and very tight, and this had an out-of-control feeling that lasted from start to finish. We need more Intamin mine trains. This is one of the best, quote, family coasters I've ever ridden. Number 12, Thors Hammer at Djurs Summerland. This was my first Gerstlauer bobsled, and on the surface, it looks like an upgraded Wild Mouse. It does start off that way, but then it gets intense. It kinda reminds me of a Gerstlauer spinner without the spinning. It has a tight helix, airtime hills, and a great helix finale over the water. For as forceful as it is, it's also very smooth. One of the smoothest coasters that I've ridden, and it has a great setting among the trees in the lake. I had so much fun with this coaster, and before the trip, I saw it as just another Wild Mouse, so I didn't rank it. Number 11, Valkyria at Leeburg. Before the trip, I had this at number 11, and here it ends up. This B&M dive opened in 2018, one of the smaller ones at 164 feet, but it has a very good setting over and under footpaths, and I found it to have a solid layout. I was nervous about this one. It seems like small dive coasters can be hit or miss, and given how I didn't really like Yukon Striker, maybe dive coasters in general were on trial for me. I got to ride all 3 rows, and because I was using the single rider line, I would always end up on the right side of the train. I finally got a ride on the left side, and it was a lot more fun. I can't explain why, it just seems the elements ride better when you're on that side of the train. Keep in mind, this is 6 across, so there's a big gap from one side to the other. I got some good suspension on the first drop. I like the big overbank and the 2 rolls at the end. It's probably right in the middle of my dive coaster list. Number 10, Hoevelen at Djurs Summerland. After I released my pre-trip top 15, everyone said I was sleeping on Hoevelen. My experience with Intamin family straddle coasters has not been good. I did not like Wavebreaker, and I thought this was just another one of those. It was not. It actually had some bite. Almost 3,300 feet of track, almost 53 miles an hour. That second launch and the way it winds around the rocks is absolutely amazing, but in general, it was pretty tame. It was still a family coaster, just with a couple really awesome moments. If you all in the comments hadn't hyped this up, I would have been very surprised and more impressed, but my expectations were too high. I didn't have this ranked, obviously, and it wound up in my top 10. Number 9, Monster at Groenland. This barely cracked my list at number 15, a very small and compact B&M invert, but I love weird rides and weird layouts, so I was looking forward to it. After going to Groenland, this absolutely stood out as a star of the park. Only 2,300 feet of track, 111 feet tall, 56 miles an hour. I thought at the very least this would be super intense. To my surprise, it was not intense at all. It didn't feel a thing like a Batman clone, but it still managed to be very whippy, especially in the back row on that first drop. And if I could describe this in one word, it would be graceful. So smooth, so much pure fun, and it even had a surprise airtime hill with actual airtime. That's very rare in an invert. We rode this 4 times at night to close out the park, and by the end, it seemed like it was more intense, and I really enjoyed the airtime in the middle of the train. You lose some of that whip, but the airtime is more powerful. This also has an underground station which is awesome, and speaks to how crammed Groenland really is. Number 8, Leeburg at Leeburg. I knew this ride would be interesting. A long terrain zero Schwarzkopf mine train coaster, almost 4,400 feet long, riding up and down the side of a hill. I just wasn't sure how good the ride would be. I put this at number 13, and it jumped all the way to number 8. At Leeburg, this was absolutely in our main rotation. You ride Helix and Baldur and Valkyria, and you also make your reservation for Leeburg when you can get one. The first quarter of this ride is elite. Everything before the first mid-course brake run is amazing. Very strong positives and an out-of-control feeling. But when it starts those diving helices, it slows down and gets kinda repetitive. Still, a very long ride, a good mix of forces, even a couple pops of airtime. It has that janky feeling that adds to the fun, and it's got amazing operations that's on the level of Disney and Universal. Number 7, Kongan at Thors Summerland. I think this was the biggest surprise of the trip. Like Mine Train Ulven, here's an Intamin family coaster that I'm not really familiar with. I also heard this was rough, so I was bracing myself. Turns out, it wasn't rough at all, just a small rattle at worst. And this was way better than the Vekoma family suspended coasters, which are in their own right very good also. This has amazing station effects. It launches you out of there and into a pre-lift section, so you're impressed from the start. And after the drop, it's a very intense ride of low-to-the-ground turns, over 2,700 feet long, 98 feet tall, 53 miles an hour. I know it's a family coaster, but it didn't feel like one, and it's one we had to come back to for some re-rides. Number 6, Pattin at Thors Summerland. After riding this 12 times, I had some very mixed opinions, and I spilled all those out in its own video. Check that out if you want, but here's the cliff notes. I had heard about these Intamin megalights for years. Not very big, but very powerful. 98-foot drop, 53 miles an hour, about 2,500 feet of track. I really enjoyed this, but it had some issues. Some of the elements didn't really bite, especially in the first half, and that could have just been because the weather was so bad. It had some awesome twisted airtime hills in the second half that saved the ride, but I did leave a little bit disappointed. My last ride during ERT was the best one. I didn't love the lap bars, but I got a little bit of airtime room, and I could feel the force on the ride. It just wasn't the best day to ride it, so it went from number 4 on my first list down to number 6. Number 5, Thunder Coaster at Tusenfryd. If Kongan wasn't the biggest surprise, I'd give that honor to Thunder Coaster. This was number 14 on my list, my first Vekoma wooden coaster, now equipped with long Timberliner trains ever since 2015, and I could not get enough of this ride. First things first, this will beat you up. This ride really brought the pleasure and the pain in big doses. That pothole after the first drop was absolutely horrible, but this layout was awesome. There's so much airtime from start to finish. It has over 3,100 feet of track, and it hauls through the course. I did get a lot of different rides on this. It seemed like a wet track meant a faster ride. Once it dried out, it wasn't as good, but we also had some rides with a near-empty train. From what I can tell, this is a quality ride, and if they can make it smoother, that would make it even better. Number 4, Storm, the Dragon Legend at Tusenfryd. I had this right in the middle at number 7, a Gerstlauer suspended launch coaster, a first of its kind, so obviously I didn't know what to expect. After my first ride, I realized this had forces I'd never felt on any other coaster. This has a multi-pass launch, great hang time in the back, going backward up the last inversion, and then you get more amazing airtime on the first dive loop, dive down and hit a crazy ejector airtime hill. So I haven't gotten much inverted airtime before this trip, and between this and Monster, I have enough for a lifetime. But where Monster has some good B&M floater air, this was some serious RMC style ejector. It's a weird feeling getting thrown out of your seat when the track's above your head. The last two inversions have some whip, but they're not that exciting. This is a short ride, less than 1,200 feet, but the multi-pass launch helps a lot. During ERT, we got 2 cycles, but that's not the way it usually runs. I obviously like the ride a lot more when they send us around twice without stopping, and when they don't do it, it seems kind of incomplete. Still, the mix of weird forces makes this a top 4 ride for me. Number 3, Baldur at Leeburg. This was also my pre-trip number 3, so I was optimistic, but it was still a guarded optimism. I have a whole video for this ride too, check that out if you want, but I knew this ride's reputation going in. Intamin prefab, but don't expect El Toro. It's about half the size and lacks the intensity, but it's an absolute airtime factory. I figured, as long as the airtime was good, I didn't care if it wasn't intense, or how repetitive it was. I would still enjoy it. Well, the airtime was very good. The repetitive nature and the slow turns did bother me, and it takes a while for this to warm up. In the end, I found the middle of the train offers the best airtime, mixing power and sustainability, so if you make it to Leeburg, give row 8 a try. Number 2, Wildfire at Kolmarden. This was my number 1 pre-trip coaster and it wasn't even close. I love RMC and this one looks top tier. The only concern I had was roughness. The other RMC Woodies that I've ridden got rough after just a couple years, and this one is already 7 years old. Good news, it wasn't rough, but it lost a ton of steam and its second half was very weak. That keeps it out of the number 1 spot. Aside from that, super smooth ride, super long ride, over 4,100 feet of track, amazing first drop at 161 feet. The view from the lift hill is out of this world. It has the best stall I've ever seen. Good ejector airtime, a great train setting. It is truly an amazing experience. Wildfire has its own video also. I'll leave that link down below. Number 1, Helix at Leeburg. Before the trip, I only had this at number 6. I knew it would either be amazing or just kinda meh. It's a mock multi-launch, and those can be kind of hit or miss. I was optimistic. This was built in a hillside and has over 4,500 feet of track. I could not believe how long this ride was. It never seemed to end. It mixes in 7 inversions, but still has time for some ejector airtime moments, 2 launches, and lower the ground twists and turns, ending with an amazing inline twist. Check out my full review on this, especially if you aren't familiar with this coaster. Even though I had this at number 6, I thought it could be as high as 2 or 3, but never thought it would pass up Wildfire, but here we are. Between Wildfire's weak second half and Helix's amazing layout and mix of forces, this was my top coaster in Europe. I mentioned there were 5 coasters that were on my pre-trip list that didn't make this list. 3 of those were at Farouk Summerland, but I want to talk about the other 2. One was Speed Monster at Tussenfrid. That was number 12 and ended up at number 19. This is an Intamin accelerator, but that launch really lets up and doesn't feel very intense. It has some good inversions, but overall I wasn't impressed. I didn't think an Intamin accelerator could be that weak, and it didn't deserve a top 15 spot. The other was Tornado at Bakken. This was number 5 on my list and ended up at number 16, so it just barely missed. This is a weird Intamin spinning coaster, and it was intense, but it was a big letdown. No, I didn't get boost mode, and maybe that would have changed my opinion, but I thought the beginning was amazing and the end was amazing, and the middle was basically nothing. Hardly any spinning, no dips or dives. It felt like a lot of filler to bridge the start and the end. I enjoyed it, especially my second ride, but it wasn't better than Han Cotton, and that was my number 15. That ripped my face off from start to finish, and that's what I wanted from Tornado. That's a wrap on this video. If you have any thoughts on any of these coasters, sound off in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please drop a like. And if you're new here and want to see more content like this, please give me a sub. I have a playlist with all my European vlogs and all my coaster reviews. Also, check out my links below for my Discord server. That has a news section of nightly news summaries for the theme park world. And my second channel where I post copyright-free off-ride footage. And my baseball channel if you also happen to love baseball. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all next time.